I am Beth, and today we're reading 3rd Maccabees 5 and 6. Then the king, completely inflexible, was filled with overpowering anger and wrath. So he summoned Herman, keeper of the elephants, and ordered him that on the following day to drug all the elephants, 500 in number, with large handfuls of frankincense and plenty of unmixed wine, and to drive them in, maddened by the lavish abundance of drink, so that the Jews might meet their doom. When he had given these orders, he returned to his feasting, together with those of his friends and of the army who were especially hostile towards the Jews. And Herman, keeper of the elephants, proceeded faithfully to carry out the orders. The servants in charge of the Jews went out in the evening and bound the hands of the wretched people, and arranged for their continued custody through the night. Convinced that the whole nation would experience its final destruction, for to the Gentiles it appeared that the Jews were left without any aid, because in their bonds they were forcibly confined on every side. But with tears and a voice hard to silence, they all called upon the Almighty Lord and ruler of all power, their merciful God and Father, praying that he avert with vengeance the evil plot against them, and in a glorious manifestation rescue them from the fate now prepared for them. So their entreaty ascended fervently to heaven. Herman, however, when he had drugged the pitiless elephants until they had been filled with a great abundance of wine and satiated with frankincense, presented himself at the courtyard early in the morning to report to the king about these preparations. But the Lord sent upon the king a portion of sleep that from the beginning, night and day, is bestowed by him who grants it to whomever he wishes. And by the action of the Lord he was overcome by so pleasant and deep a sleep that he quite failed in his lawless purpose, and was completely frustrated in his inflexible plan. Then the Jews, since they had escaped the appointed hour, praised their holy God, and again implored him who is easily reconciled to show the might of his all-powerful hand to the arrogant Gentiles. But now, since it was nearly the middle of the 10th hour, the person who was in charge of the invitations, seeing that the guests were assembled, approached the king and nudged him. And when he had, with difficulty, roused him, he pointed out that the hour of the banquet was already slipping by, and he gave him an account of the situation. The king, after considering this, returned to his drinking and ordered those present for the banquet to recline opposite him. When this was done, he urged them to give themselves over to revelry and to make the present portion of the banquet joyful by celebrating all the more. After the party had been going on for some time, the king summoned Herman, and with sharp threats demanded to know why the Jews had been allowed to remain alive through the present day. But when he, with the corroboration of the king's friends, pointed out that while it was still night, he had carried out completely the order given him, the king, possessed by a savagery worse than that of Phalaris, said that the Jews were benefited by today's sleep. But, he added, tomorrow, without delay, prepare the elephants in the same way for the destruction of the lawless Jews. When the king had spoken, all those present readily and joyfully with one accord gave their approval, and all went to their own homes. But they did not so much as employ the duration of the night in sleep, as in devising all sorts of insults for those they thought to be doomed. Then, as soon as the cock had crowed in the early morning, Herman, having equipped the animals, began to move them along the great colonnade. The crowds of the city had been assembled for this most pitiful spectacle, and they were eagerly waiting for daybreak. But the Jews, at their last gasp, since the time had run out, stretched their hands toward heaven, and with most tearful supplication and mournful dirges, implored the supreme God to help them again at once. The rays of the sun were not yet shed abroad, and while the king was receiving his friends, Herman arrived and invited him to come out, indicating that what the king desired was ready for action. But he, on receiving the report, and being struck by the unusual invitation to come out, since he had been completely overcome by incomprehension, inquired what the matter was for, which this had been so zealously completed for him. This was the act of God who rules over all things, for he had implanted in the king's mind a forgetfulness of the things he had previously devised. Then Hermann and all the king's friends pointed out that the animals and the armed forces were ready, O king, according to your eager purpose. But at these words he was filled with an overpowering wrath, because the providence of God of his whole mind had been deranged concerning these matters. And with a threatening look he said, if your parents or children were present, I would have prepared them to a rich feast for the savage animals instead of the Jews, who give me no ground for complaint, and have exhibited to an extraordinary degree a full and firm loyalty to my ancestors. In fact, you would have been deprived of life instead of these, if it were not for an affection arising from our nurture in common and your usefulness. So Hermann suffered an unexpected and dangerous threat, and his eyes wavered and his face fell. The king's friends, one by one, sullenly slipped away and dismissed the assembled people to their own occupations. Then the Jews, on hearing what the king had said, praised the manifest Lord, King of kings, since this also was his aid that they had received. The king, however, reconvened the party in the same manner and urged the guests to return to their celebrating. After summoning Hermann, he said in a threatening tone, how many times, you poor wretch, must I give you orders about these things? Equip the elephants now once more for the destruction of the Jews tomorrow. But the officials who were at the table with him, wondering at his instability of mind, remonstrated as follows, O king, how long will you put us to the test? As though we were idiots, ordering now for a third time that they be destroyed, and revoking again your decree in the matter? As a result, the city is in tumult because of its expectation. It's crowded with masses of people, and also in constant danger of being plundered. At this, the king, a Phalaris in everything, and filled with madness, took no account of the changes of mind that had come about within him for the protection of the Jews, and he firmly swore an irrevocable oath that he would send them to death without delay, and would also march against Judea and rapidly level it to the ground with fire and spear, and by burning to the ground the temple inaccessible to him, would quickly render it forever empty of those who'd offered sacrifices there. Then the friends and officers departed with great joy, and they confidently posted the armed forces at the places in the city most favorable for keeping guard. Now when the animals had been brought virtually to a state of madness, so to speak, by the very fragrant dross of wine mixed with frankincense, and had been equipped with frightful devices, the elephant keeper entered at about dawn into the courtyard, the city now being filled with countless masses of people crowding their way to the hippodrome, and urged the king on to the matter at hand. So he, when he had filled his impious mind with a deep rage, rushed out in full force along with the animals, wishing to witness with invulnerable heart and with his own eyes the grievous and pitiful destruction of the aforementioned people. When the Jews saw the dust raised by the elephants going out at the gate, and by the following armed forces, as well as by the trampling of the crowd, and heard the loud tumultuous noise, they thought that this was their last moment of life, the end of their most miserable suspense. And giving way to lamentation and groans, they kissed each other, embracing relatives and falling into one another's arms, parents and children, mothers and daughters, and others with babies at their breasts who were drawing their last milk. Not only this, but when they considered the help that they had received from heaven, they prostrated themselves with one accord on the ground, removing their babies from their breasts, and cried out in a very loud voice, imploring the ruler over every power to manifest himself and be merciful to them as they stood now at the gates of death. Then a certain Eleazar, famous among the priests of the country, who had attained a ripe old age and throughout his life had been adorned with every virtue, directed the elders around him to stop calling upon the holy God, and he prayed as follows: King of great power, Almighty God most high, governing all creation with mercy, look upon the descendants of Abraham, O Father, upon the children of the sainted Jacob, a people of your consecrated portion, who are perishing as foreigners in a foreign land. Pharaoh with his abundance of chariots, the former rule of this Egypt, exalted with lawless insolence and boastful tongue, you destroyed together with his arrogant army by drowning them in the sea, manifesting the light of your mercy on the nation of Israel. Sennacherib exalting his countless forces, oppressive kings of the Assyrians, who had already gained control of the whole world by the spear, and was lifted up against your holy city, speaking grievous words with boasting and insolence. You, O Lord, broke in pieces, showing your power to many nations. The 3 companions in Babylon who had voluntarily surrendered their lives to the flames, so as not to serve vain things. You rescued unharmed, even to a hair, moistening the fiery furnace with dew, and turning the flame against all their enemies. Daniel, who through envious slanders was thrown down into the ground to lions as food for wild animals, you brought up to the light unharmed. And Jonah, wasting away in the belly of a huge sea-born monster, you, Father, watched over and restored unharmed to all his family. And now you who hate insolence, all merciful and protector of all, reveal yourself quickly to those of the nation of Israel, who are being outrageously treated by the abominable and lawless Gentiles. Even if our lives have become entangled in impieties in our exile, rescue us from the hand of the enemy, and destroy us, Lord, by whatever fate you choose. Let not the vain-minded praise their vanities at the destruction of your beloved people, saying not even their God has rescued them. But you, O Eternal One, who have all might and all power, watch over us now and have mercy on us, who by the senseless insolence of the lawless are being deprived of life in the manner of traitors. And let the Gentiles cower totally in fear of your invincible might, O honored one, who have power to save the nation of Jacob. The whole throng of infants and their parents entreat you with tears. Let it be shown to all the Gentiles that you are with us, O Lord, and have not turned your face from us. But just as you have said, not even when they were in the land of their enemies did I neglect them. So accomplish it, O Lord. Just as Eleazar was ending his prayer, the king arrived at the hippodrome with the animals and all the arrogance of his forces. And when the Jews observed this, they raised great cries to heaven, so that even the nearby valleys resounded with them, and brought an uncontrollable terror upon the army. Then the most glorious, almighty, and true God revealed his holy face, and opened the heavenly gates, from which 2 glorious angels of fearful aspect descended, visible to all but the Jews. They opposed the forces of the enemy and filled them with confusion and terror, binding them with immovable shackles. Even the king began to shudder bodily, and he forgot his sullen insolence. The animals turned back upon the armed forces following them and began to trample and destroy them. Then the king's anger was turned to pity and tears because of the things that he had devised beforehand. For when he heard the shouting and saw them all fallen headlong to destruction, he wept and angrily threatened his friends, saying, "You are committing treason and surpassing tyrants in cruelty, and even me, your benefactor, you are now attempting to deprive of dominion and life by secretly devising acts of no advantage to the kingdom. Who has driven from their homes those who faithfully kept our country's fortresses, and foolishly gathered every one of them here? Who is it that has so lawlessly encompassed with outrageous treatment those who from the beginning differed from all nations in their goodwill toward us, and often have accepted willingly the worst of human dangers. Loose and untie their unjust bonds, send them back to their homes in peace, begging pardon for your former actions. Release the children of the Almighty and living God of heaven, who from the time of our ancestors until now has granted an unimpeded and noble stability to our government. These then were the things he said, and the Jews, immediately released, praised their holy God and Savior, since they now had escaped death. Then the king, when he had returned to the city, summoned the officials in charge of the revenues and ordered him to provide the Jews both wines and everything else needed for the festival of 7 days, deciding that they should celebrate their rescue with all joyfulness in the same place in which they had expected to meet their destruction. Accordingly, those disgracefully treated and near to death, or rather, who stood at its gates, arranged for a banquet of deliverance, instead of a bitter and lamentable death. And full of joy, they apportioned to celebrants the place that had been prepared for their destruction and Accordingly, those disgracefully treated and near death, or rather, who stood at its gates, arranged for a banquet of deliverance instead of a bitter and lamentable death. And full of joy, they apportioned to celebrants the place that had been prepared for their destruction and burial. They stopped their chanting of dirges and took up the song of their ancestors, praising God their Savior and worker of wonders. Putting an end to all mourning and wailing, they formed choruses as a sign of peaceful joy. Likewise, also the king, after convening a great banquet to celebrate these events, gave thanks to heaven unceasingly and lavishly for the unexpected rescue that he had experienced. Those who had previously believed that the Jews would just be destroyed and become food for birds, and had joyfully registered them, groaned as they themselves were overcome by disgrace, and their fire-breathing boldness was ignominiously quenched. The Jews, as we have said before, arranged the aforementioned choral group and passed the time in feasting, to the accompaniment of joyous thanksgiving and psalms. And when they had ordained a public rite for those things in their whole community and for their descendants, they instituted the observance of the aforesaid days as a festival, not for drinking and gluttony, but because of the deliverance that had come to them through God. Then they petitioned the king, asking for dismissal to their homes. So the registration was carried out from the 25th of Pachon to the 4th of Epiphi for 40 days, and their destruction was set for the 5th to the 7th of Epiphi, the 3 days on which the Lord of all most gloriously revealed his mercy and rescued them all together and unharmed. Then they feasted, being provided with everything by the king until the 14th day, on which also they made the petition for their dismissal. The king granted their request at once, and wrote the following letter for them to the generals in the cities, magnanimously expressing his concern. Revelation 18. After this I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. He cried out mightily with a loud voice, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, and a haunt for every unclean and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her sexual immorality. The kings of the earth have committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. Then I heard another voice from heaven, saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you partake in her sins, and lest you receive her plagues. for her sins have reached up to heaven. For God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her as she has rendered to you, and repay her double for her deeds. In the cup which she has mixed a double portion for her. To the extent that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, so give her torment and sorrow. For in her heart she says, I sit as a queen and am no widow and will see no sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judges her. The kings of the earth who have committed adultery and lived luxuriously with her will weep and mourn over her when they see the smoke of her burning. Standing far off for the fear of her torment, they will say, Alas, alas, for that great city, that mighty city Babylon. In 1 hour your judgment has come. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise any more. The merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet, all kinds of scented wood, artifacts of ivory, all merchandise of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, myrrh and frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses, chariots, and slaves, and lives of men. The fruit that your soul lusted after has departed from you, and all the things which are graceful and exquisite have departed from you, and you shall never find them. The merchants of these things, who gained wealth by her, will stand far off for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was arrayed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. In 1 hour such riches came to nothing. All sea captains and seafaring men, sailors, and all who trade by sea stood far off, and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like this great city? They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, in which all who had ships in the sea grew rich from her wealth. In 1 hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven and holy people, and apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, With such violence shall the great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more. The sound of harpists and musicians, flute players and trumpeters, shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more, and the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. The light of a lamp shall shine in you no more, and the voice of bridegroom and of bride shall be heard in you no more. For your merchants were great men of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. In her was found the blood of prophets and of holy people and of all who were slain on the earth. Psalm 16. Preserve me, O Lord, for in you I take refuge. I have said to the Lord, You are my Lord. My welfare has no existence outside of you. For the holy ones who are in the land, they are the majestic ones. In them is my delight. Those who chase after other gods, their sorrows will be multiplied. Their drink offerings of blood I will not offer, nor lift their name to my lips. The Lord is the portion of my inheritance and of my cup. You support my lot. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Yes, an inheritance is beautiful for me. I will bless the Lord who has given me counsel. My affections also instruct me in the night seasons. I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand. I will not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad, and my glory rejoices. My flesh also will rest in security. For you will not leave my soul in Sheol, nor will you suffer your godly one to see corruption. You will make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand there are pleasures forevermore. Proverbs. The preparations of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. All the ways of a man are clean in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirit. Commit your works to the Lord, and your thoughts will be established. The Lord has made all things for himself, yes, even the wicked for the day of evil. Everyone who is proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Be assured, he will not be unpunished. By mercy and truth, iniquity is purged, and by the fear of the Lord, men depart from evil. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. A man's heart devises his way, but the Lord directs his steps. A divine sentence is in the lips of the king. His mouth does not transgress in judgment. A just weight and balance belong to the Lord. All the weights of the bag are his work. It is an abomination to kings to commit wickedness, for the throne is established by righteousness. Righteous lips are the delight of kings, and they love him who speaks right. The wrath of a king is as messengers of death, but a wise man will pacify it. In the light of the king's countenance is life, and his favor is a cloud of the latter rain. How much better to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding that is to be chosen rather than silver. The highway of the upright is to depart from evil. He who keeps his way preserves his soul. Pride goes before the destruction, and a haughty spirit before the fall. Better it is to be of humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. He who handles a matter wisely will find good, and whoever trusts in the Lord, happy is he. The wise in heart will be called prudent, and the sweetness of the lips increases learning. Understanding is a wellspring of life to him who has lost it, but the instruction of fools is folly. The heart of the wise teaches his mouth, and adds learning to his lips. Pleasant words are as honeycomb, sweet to the soul, and health to the bones. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. He who labors, labors for himself, for his mouth craves it of him. An ungodly man digs up evil, and in his lips there is as a fire burning. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. He who labors, labors for himself, for his mouth craves it of him. An ungodly man digs up evil, and in his lips there is as a burning fire. A perverse man sows strife, and a whisperer separates the best of friends. A violent man entices his neighbor, and leads him into the way that is not good. He shuts his eyes to devise perverse things, moving his lips as he brings evil to pass. The gray-haired head is a crown of glory if it is found in the way of righteousness. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. The lot is cast into the lap, but the whole outcome is of the Lord. Thus ends the reading for today. Never walk alone.